All right, the Legal Podcast is up here on a Thursday night. At some point, we'll have a name for it. I think we have one. We just haven't moved on it yet. Justin Watkins is here from Battle Worn Injury Lawyers. Adam Hill. We got to find out what he did today. Every day for Adam is nuts. Yesterday with 2 COVID tests in one day because the Raiders and UFC are asking him to take tests. So, Justin, where are you?
Solana Beach. It's a little town just north of San Diego.
Nice. All right. Well, let's jump into it. I just have some quick questions coming out. I have a couple of what the blank questions. Like, what does this mean? Out of the Bay Area, Uber CEO says its service will probably shut down temporarily in California if it's forced to classify drivers as employees. This is a long-standing battle, right?
Yeah, California and Uber have been going back and forth on this for a long time. And as part of the history, you'll remember that, like, Uber started in San Francisco, and it was a friendly sort of relationship at the beginning, but then over time, the California legislature has sought to have some concessions from Uber as to how to treat their drivers, provide them some benefits, just short of classifying them as employees. And then it got contentious. Obviously, the biggest part of Uber's business model is that each driver is an independent contractor, not an employee. And so therefore they don't have to provide minimum wage standards. They don't have to pay payroll taxes. And they also don't have to provide any sort of benefits that would be required under California law, health and otherwise. They don't pay into the unemployment tax. I mean, their whole structure is very favorable to operating in California, which can be a difficult state to operate in and avoid taxes. So over time, the relationship is sort of soured, and California has been moving closer and closer to deeming Uber drivers as employees so that they can get benefits and treated as any other employee, which would have significant financial ramifications for Uber, and it looks like they're getting close.
Adam, follow up.
Yeah, I saw the Uber CEO who's mentioned the story. I saw him on an interview yesterday, and he was like, "Hey, we're cool with this, but we have to shut down, not because we're like, screw this, we're not going to pay these people as employees, but we just need time to process all of this and log them in as employees and get all their benefits squared away." It has nothing to do with like us pouting about this decision or anything like that. Like, that's just PR, I would imagine. Like, this is the company being like, this sucks for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bad time for that to happen, right? I mean, I'm sure they're not doing as well as they used to be doing. I don't know about you. I know you drive Uber a lot, but the few times that I've had to try to get an Uber in Vegas right now, it was almost impossible. But I do give some credibility to that argument that, hey, shifting all of these people from independent contractors to employees takes some administrative work. So I can imagine that would take some time, and you wouldn't want to operate illegally or in contradiction to the new law. So I could buy that argument for a little bit, and frankly, in this time, it's a tough time to affect Uber's financial status so significantly in one of their biggest states. So it all sort of makes sense, and who knows, they might be sort of lobbying on the back end for some sort of legislative fix here, and want time for that to happen. I don't know the ins and outs of that.
This is not a legal question, but I will say, like, the last time I used rideshare here in Vegas, I said it would be the last time, because I got in, and of course wearing a mask, the driver was wearing a mask because you're supposed to, and the driver goes, "You know what, I'm not really a big fan of these. If you want to take yours off, we can take our masks off." And I was like, no, because that means you're doing it with other people too. Like, no, I'm not gonna, no, I'm out. I'm not gonna do this anymore. Like, I'm finished with this.
To Justin's point earlier in the chat, wondering from the viewers if you've had trouble getting rides. It's slowed down a whole lot. Ray thinks that a lot of drivers don't want to do anything or don't want anything to do with being full-time employees. What is the disadvantage for the Uber drivers?
Well, there is a tax ramification for them that when you're an independent contractor, there's a lot of write-offs that you're going to get that you don't get as an employee. So gas and that's you would actually probably get that as an employee too. But payment of your car insurance and upkeep on your car, all of those things would be seen as reasonable business expenses that you can get a deduction on before your income is taxable. So depending on the amount of driving that you do, it could benefit some and be a hardship for others.
So I don't imagine that you actually read this law, but with this type of law, like if you are going to require them to make them employees, would it be an option, or would you have to hire them? Like, could a driver be like, I'm good being where I am, I don't want to be an employee?
I think I haven't looked into the law, but my guess would be that the law is not specific to Uber. It is saying if you engage in business such as these, your drivers would be deemed employees. However, you choose to try to classify them internally is irrelevant. From the state of California standpoint, they are employees and they must be provided with the following, treat them as you treat any other employee in the state. So I guess in that context, again, without reading the law, there could be sort of this conflict of state and federal tax law, where in California, they would be employees under their state definition, and you'd have to pay all those taxes associated with that. But on the federal level, they would still be seen as 1099s. Frankly, I don't know how that would work, and I don't know if there can be such a conflict. But if it's possible, this could be that situation.
Next what the blank story that I found, Florida. And here we go with some more anti-maskers. And we've had this issue with some law enforcement here in Nevada. Florida sheriff orders deputies not to wear masks, bans civilians in masks from office. What?
Yeah, if there's a state that you can get away with this, it'd be Florida, right? I mean, you're gonna get the backing of the governor when you do something stupid like this. Obviously, you couldn't do this in Nevada. It is part of the governor's emergency directive that masks are mandated. So you couldn't legally do this.
It says in here, this is Sheriff Billy Woods, Marion County. I can already hear the whining, and just so you know, I did not make this decision easily, and I've weighed it out for about the past 2 weeks. The policy applies to all 900 department employees, and Woods said his decision is final. Really? So no one can wear them. No one can protect themselves in the office.
Yeah, that rings as bullshit to me, because if you'd really thought about this and you struggled with the decision, then the rule wouldn't be masks are banned. It would be that masks are optional, right? Like if you feel comfortable wearing a mask, you can. If you don't want to do it, or I can even foresee some argument to be made that it makes it harder for a police officer in the streets to do their job in some fashion. Communications becoming a problem. I don't know. I'm not out there on the streets. They can't be heard as clearly, something like that, to say that if an officer chooses not to wear a mask or support, or specifically anybody who's out in the street, I'm telling you not to wear a mask because it's creating more problems than it is solutions. But to say everybody in the office and masks are banned everywhere doesn't sound like a well thought out policy to me.
All right.
I'm sure guns are allowed, though.
Yeah, no doubt.
Next one. I can't figure this one out. I think I'm like misreading something, or it's a fake story, or I don't know. I don't get it. 8 News Now. 1,012 Metro employees tested for COVID-19. 236 positive cases confirmed. This is on July 29th. Am I misunderstanding what this is saying? Is this saying like 23% of the employees at Metro have tested positive for COVID? Does that seem a little bit alarming.
I saw that story come out, and it didn't surprise me.
Well, yeah. I mean, when I saw it, it's like my first thought is there's going to be people out there who are like, we have to be pro law enforcement. They're walking into dangerous situations and they're getting COVID. And then my second thought was they won't wear fucking masks.
I know.
Right? They're not part of the mandate. They don't wear masks. But this just seems to me like, wait a second. There can't be like 23% of the employees there with COVID. That doesn't seem, it's like, that's got to be fake news. What?
No, I believe it. I think, if anything, that number is somewhat lower than what I expected. I've heard similarly high numbers in firefighters, and I don't know, man. I don't have a lot of interaction with Metro, but the times that I have seen them out and around, and we actually had like a false alarm at our house once, and Metro came. Two different times with a problem with our keypad. But anyway, one time they were all masked up, gloved up, and the other time, like, nothing. And so it didn't seem consistent, but Metro is coming into contact with so many dang people on a daily basis that it wouldn't surprise me that they'd be higher than the public. And remember, right now, on the latest numbers, of all the people tested, the positivity rate right now is 11% of people tested.
Right.
So I don't know. I wasn't shocked by the number. A shocking number for me with Metro or with the firefighters would be like something over 50%. And even then I'd be like, yeah, I get it.
I do appreciate our longtime viewers here pointing out that it is Channel 8, so we can't fully trust it. And I also want to point out, like, in some of those positivity rate numbers, we do have to look a little deeper. This one seems right, but like there's some organizations will test, like, I've talked about getting tested with the Raiders every day. So at the end of this, they're going to say, well, there was 10,000 tests administered and 4 positives. They're like, oh, 4 out of 10,000 had it. Well, like, no, it was 1,000 people tested 10 times. Like, that's not really 10,000 tests to me.
Yeah, and not to go to all conspiracy theory on everybody on this, but Nevada has recently changed the way in which they characterize that. So it used to be person specific. So it didn't matter if you had 8 tests or 1, you were counted as one person. And so if you had a positivity, you wouldn't be 1 out of 8, you'd be 1 out of 1 out of those 8 tests. And they switched that about a week ago to the denominator on that is the number of tests, and the numerator is the number of positives in the number of tests. But that 11% rate I'm talking about is on a per person basis. That comes because the Nevada Independent does a great daily tracker of it with all these statistics, and they noted the change from the state of Nevada, and that they said they weren't going to change the way in which they reported it because they had been doing it this long. It's what made sense to them, and they were going to continue doing that forward. So now they have to do a little bit more work and sift through person positive, person negative. I can actually see arguments for both. That, hey, I've been tested twice. They were negative. Okay, now if I can become positive on my 3rd test, did that invalidate the fact that at that time that I took those prior tests, that the positivity rate in that moment of time was what it was? Now the positivity rate's higher. If we were to invalidate those 2 prior tests because I test positive the 3rd time, then you're artificially going back and changing the positivity rate going backwards, because those 2 tests are effectively gone from the system. So I can see arguments for both, but I'm going to tell you this. I think that the governor and the state of Nevada is doing everything that they can. I don't think they're cooking the books, but they're going to use the numbers in a way that tells the best story possible to keep our new cases down as low as possible, to show that we're a safe place to come visit. I think that there's no doubt about that. There's no reason to make the change midstream like they did, was it 3 days ago or 5 days ago, whatever it was, other than to make the numbers look better.
Here's a topic we covered last week, but for those who didn't hear Justin's take on it, does the Trump administration have any pull with their lawsuit against Nevada for mail-in voting? I mean, you pointed out there were some issues that were legit issues on the side of Nevada, and Trump had every right to push back and say, hey, this isn't right. You got to change this element.
Yeah, so I did actually read this lawsuit. I read all the way through the whole thing, and they spend a dozen pages in political speak, throwing bombs about, ballot harvesting and the evil Democrats and all of that. And then they got to the actual issues. And the actual issues that they're challenging are very specific and have nothing to do with all the bullshit you hear on the news about the fear of Nevada. And they're just sending ballots out to everybody, and there's going to be ballot harvesting, and they've legalized that and all that. They had 3 challenges. And I'll go in the reverse order of, I think, their success. One of them was that Nevada said that if there are 2 ballots in one envelope, that the secretaries of state, when they receive it, makes a determination of whether or not it's one voter voting twice or 2 voters who put theirs in the same ballot. So like, a married couple, you should not put your ballot in your significant other's envelope. 1 ballot per 1 envelope. But this gives them the discretion to look at that and say, was this a mistake? And do we have 2 votes being cast here, or is it 1? They're challenging that and saying it's no good. I don't think that they'll win on that. I mean, there is discretion in the election departments to determine who they're voting for. I mean, just go back to the hanging chads in Florida. The next one that they questioned was the number of polling locations on the day of the election that you can actually go and vote in person with your mail ballot, or go in there and fill out an affidavit that says, I have not yet voted and I don't have my mail ballot. They'll give you a ballot there. You fill it out, you put it in an envelope, you drop it. They have said that the rural counties are underrepresented. They cited one county that has one polling site per 35,000 people, and then they pointed to Washoe County, where Reno is, to say there it's 1 to every 10,000. I think they better be very damn careful about making this argument, because they didn't cite Clark County for a reason. Because the polling locations in Clark County are the worst proportionally. And if they win that argument, and there has to be consistency throughout the state, there's going to be a shitload more polling sites in Clark County, which is typically speaking, generally speaking, historically speaking, not good for Republican candidates. So I don't know. And the Democratic Party has intervened in that lawsuit. So you bet your ass they're going to make that argument and say, okay, cool, yeah, let's do proportional, population proportional based polling sites. Let's do it. The third argument is their best argument. And what that argument says is Nevada had created a rule that said, so long as a ballot is postmarked on the day of the election and is received within 3 days, it's counted. No problem there. All good. But they said, if there is no postmark on the ballot and it is received within 3 days, it is presumed to have been mailed on the day of the election. I think we've got a real problem there. Number one, they cited the postmaster to say, rarely do we postmark prepaid ballots, prepaid envelopes. And all of these are prepaid envelopes. So postage is already there. They typically will not postmark those. So we're going to have a whole bunch, if you believe that testimony, and I don't know the postmaster any more than anybody else. If you believe that testimony, you're going to have the bulk of the ballots that come in for those 3 days presumed to have been on the election day, when a lot of the mailing is going intercity, Las Vegas to Las Vegas, Reno to Reno, which under no circumstances should really take 3 days, because it should take a day or 2 at the worst. So their argument is it runs counter to federal law, which says that you cannot vote past the day of the election. And under this scenario, it opens up the possibility to voting the day after the election, not having it postmarked, and still receiving it before the third day. I do think that that's a real problem. I do think that they'll win on this argument in some fashion or another, or there'll be some sort of agreement made. As the tough part is it cannot be fixed in special session, which I hear there is going to be another special session coming in September.
Uh-oh.
Breaking news. Breaking news.
Any reporters listening tonight?
Yeah.
Oh, wait, me?
You don't count.
I forgot.
Yeah.
I hear there will be another special session in September, but they cannot fix this at special session because any changes legislatively to how elections are to be done must be done 90 days before an election under the Constitution, which was why they had the last special session, because the deadline was August 4th.
Yep. Got to get in that stadium money. Some questions in the chat room and ask away. Mark just asked about the suit is state or federal?
It's in federal court.
Okay. Very important stuff. John Carvelli likes your setup on the road. Okay.
Dude, best place I've ever stayed right now. I'm in a VRBO right on the beach. It's awesome.
Nice. Aaron Saul Good. How about real issues? Did Adam dye his hair platinum?
There's a light right above me. It's like a halo, like I'm an angel.
That was not a no.
Yeah.
I did not. No.
Do you have frosted tips?
No, not anymore.
Ever? Yeah. You
did, in college? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course.
I never had hair long enough to get frosted tips.
Poor guy.
It was gone before the trend came.
When did it all go? When did it when you're like, wow, this is getting bad?
19.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I was in college. But it was never too big of a deal for me because, as you guys know, I was a wrestler, and most of the time I shaved my head anyway. So it wasn't too big of a deal. Usually I grow my hair during the off season, but after my freshman year in college, I began to realize that wasn't a good idea. And so I haven't grown it back since.
Tiger Gator's into the come and go hat that I'm wearing. Truth from Duluth, pretty cool. He's been to Iowa. I actually have not been to Iowa. This is from a friend. She has to go there often. I think she has to fly into Des Moines to go drive up to Minnesota. So I haven't been there. But we had a whole discussion about convenience stores a couple weeks ago on the air, and I'm very much into come and go. Not like that. I'm intrigued.
Think they're in Colorado too.
Is that right?
I've seen them in Colorado. I'm pretty sure.
One more on the mail-in ballot thing. Actually, I've got multiple questions on the mail-in ballot thing beyond what our friend here is asking. How do the Nevada mail-in ballots compare to the Republican-controlled states that are doing mail-in that Trump doesn't seem to have an issue with?
So to be fair to Trump, there is a difference in most states. And he was talking about Florida, and he's like, well, the reason why Florida is good is because they got a good Republican governor. Florida's is a little bit different as it's currently constructed. You do have to request it, and they don't send the ballot to all registered voters. So here they send it to all registered voters, whether they're active or inactive. And people get all up in arms about active or inactive. You go on the inactive list if you haven't voted in the last 3 elections. So it doesn't mean you have any less of a right to vote than anybody else. It just means that you go on this list because there could be concerns that maybe you don't live at that place anymore. So when they try to contact you for registration, it's not updated. Or maybe you're just not a voter, but they put you on an inactive list. And frankly, that's just to help the campaigns, right? So the campaign, all voter information is public record. So all the campaigns go in there. So they know what party registration you are. They know your address. They know your name. And so when I go knock on your door, when I was running for office, I knew, okay, at this house, there are 2 Democrats and 1 Republican. So, and the Republicans, an old gentleman, if he answers the door, I'm probably not going to get very far because I was a Democrat and still a Democrat. But if I get the other two, then maybe we'll have a good conversation. But I know exactly who they are, and I know if they voted in primaries or only generals. So I can also, in a primary, target my audience so that I only knock on doors or make phone calls or emails to active voters who have voted in the last primary. So in Nevada, whoa, that was a long way to get to your question. In Nevada, the rule says you will send out ballots to all active and inactive voters. All registered voters get a ballot. And so the concern is, the theory is, there's going to be like at apartment complexes where they have a sort of a community mailbox. There's going to be a shitload of ballots just laying around because those people don't even live there anymore. Is that a possibility? Sure. Yeah, that's a possibility. Does that mean that I can just pick up all those ballots and then fill in the bubbles and then the votes will be for those, the people that I want to win? Or, that's the word of ballot harvesting. And the answer is no, unless I'm willing to forge somebody's signature and commit a felony. And if that person does not live there anymore, how in the hell am I going to know what their signature is supposed to look like? And they do a signature verification on every ballot. In fact, in this last primary, there was something on the order of 10,000 ballots that were not counted because the signatures didn't match up. And there is a process for correction. Then the Secretary of State's office or Clark County Election Department, what depends on the race, will contact you and say, hey, we got a problem with your signature verification. We need you to come in and we'll go through it, and have them sign again, show their ID. There are corrective measures.
That is real quick, Adam, because I want to move along. That is actually one of the reasons I will vote in person again, because my signature is a nightmare. In the last presidential election, I signed and they're like, well, what's going on here? That's not you. And I had to do it again. So I don't want to go through the whole rigmarole of having to go somewhere. So I'm going to vote. The other reason, well, let's examine the story before I give my opinion and we get your opinions on this. Headline here: Trump says he opposes funding USPS because of mail-in voting. And I read through the story and I never really saw a quote that like really said directly that he opposes it. I mean, he kind of dances around it. So how do you take a headline like this? Trump says he opposes funding of U.S. post offices because of mail-in voting. I mean, this would be completely against our democratic process. What are your thoughts?
Scary. My thoughts are the opposite of what you just said. I'm going to vote as soon as I receive my ballot. So
really?
That if there's a problem with
this spooks me enough that I'm like, nah. I'm like, I feel like every effort is being made to sabotage mail-in ballots, so I'm showing up. Now he's actually accomplished it with me. Like, it's not that I believe there are going to be fraudulent ballots. Like, I don't know if my ballot is going to get where it needs to get.
Yeah, that's why I want to do it early, right? So because I can check, you can check. You can go on and they do a daily download of the number of votes, and you can see your name as a voter, right? So I'm going to do it right away, 3 weeks beforehand. And that's, I got a unique situation. I don't want to come in contact with a whole bunch of people, so I still got, pandemic lockdown issues to deal with. And so I'm not going to a polling place on the day of the election. So when I get my ballot a month before the election, that sucker's going in the next day.
Yeah. By the way, I won't go vote on the day of. I'll go to early voting. Is early voting? Is there a way to check early voting that your vote is in?
Yep.
Beautiful.
Every day, the Clark County Election Department the list is freaking long, but you could download it in Excel format and sort by last name, and you can find yourself.
Adam?
Yeah, it's horrifying because he's not only opposing the funding. Now tonight they're actively taking mail sorting machines out of post offices. And by the way, if you are out there and you're saying, good, I don't like this mail-in voting, Trump should do this, fuck you, first of all. That's disgusting and undemocratic. Second of all, do you realize people count on that for fucking medications? Like, people are not going to have things that they need. There could be people severely sick or even dying because he's trying to fix an election. This is not a joke. This is not some silly, like, oh, Trump's at it again. Like, this is fucking disgusting what he is doing. It really is. And I don't know. As partisan as you could possibly be, I don't know how you could defend this. Like, people could actually die from him fixing an election.
Yep. I co-sign onto that, and I would say too, I have seen this movement on social media. I don't know if you've seen this, and I don't even know if it's possible, where people are saying they will volunteer their time to USPS starting on the election. A lot of retired people saying they'll volunteer, and I don't even know if the USPS is accepting that or if it's part of an effort coordinated with them, but that would be fucking awesome. If a whole bunch of citizens volunteer their time to ensure that all of this gets done right, I'd do it. If it's a real thing, I'll do it.
Really, you'll be a delivery driver?
Yeah. No, it's for I think it's processing.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Sorting and stuff because they're yanking out all these sorting machines.
Yeah, I saw some people discussing on Twitter today that they'd actually like to drive around and pick up ballots, but then there's you could sabotage that and people could just freaking we'll take it over. Okay, right in the garbage.
Of course.
Yeah, that's cool if you want to commit a felony and go to jail. I don't.
And I have seen a lot of, and you never know if they're real, but there is postal union people, at least, that are coming out and saying, like, no, we will work as much as we have to. Like, we're not going to let him stop us. Like, we're going to do our job no matter what they try to fix, no matter how much you try to screw it over. So hopefully,
and why wouldn't you, right? Like, he's trying to dismantle your organization and therefore your job. So he's created a lot of incentive for them to work round the clock to make sure that he's no longer in office.
I was going to say, governmentally, what is the process to trying to stop, like the deal with the sorting machines with the Postmaster General? Like, how would other branches step in and go, wait a second, what are we doing here?
It's civics time. Because it's tough because the USPS is part of the executive branch, right? He gets to determine the resources and how that gets used. Could Congress do some sort of legislative fix to it? Probably, but is that going to happen? No, because the Republicans control the Senate. So I think it would have to be a very clever way to avoid the executive branch's discretion in the application of resources. But I'm sure it can be done. They've done these kinds of things before where the power of the purse overrides the power of the executive. The problem is, and this is a criticism I have federally and within this state, the legislative branch has just become a megaphone for the executive branch rather than a check or balance to it. It's happening here right now, and I hate it. There's come up with your own ideas and push back, even if the executive is in the same party as you. Not party over country. It's garbage, and it's happening. It's not just in Nevada. It's happening everywhere. The legislative branch is just totally weakened.
Yeah, and they're gone anyway. So
yep, that's true.
They ain't gonna be heading back to do the work. All right. So we got story of the week. The timing was unfortunate because it came down on Friday, the day after Justin and Adam and I do this legal podcast. But I know Adam really likes the story, and you guys, I got to go at you. You guys are jabronis. Well, Adam's a jabroni for the way he was doing it, and then Justin was just cooperating. The chance to not mention Vital Vegas and the way you guys were doing it was epic. You must have said blogger 38 times yesterday when we talked about this, but we wanted some more time to talk about the Sahara suing the dude Scott at Vital Vegas over closure claims. Again, I ask, is there a case here? And if there's not, I don't understand why the Sahara would even mess with it. If they have attorneys, shouldn't you make sure that the people you're paying for these things, ensure that you're not wasting your freaking time?
Yeah, that's the biggest criticism I have of this is, where is the counselor of law aspect of this? Where is somebody grabbing the owner? Was it Morello, right? And saying, this is dumb, right? Like, this dude's not going to have any money that's going to be significant, and you're going to spend way more on me to fight this thing, and you're probably going to freaking lose because it was stated as a rumor. The tweet in question and story in question specifically said, rumors are blah, blah, blah. And so how are you ever going to prove that somebody didn't say something to him that, like, hey, it's dead around here. I wouldn't be surprised if we're closed by the end of the month or something like that. And then on top of it, why would you open up your organization to discovery of internal documents that could speak directly to this issue? Because there's no possible way you guys didn't discuss closing, temporary closing, funding. Do we have enough funding? What's our liquidity like? How are we going to make it through this? And all of that is just fuel to the fire. And you know what? As I say this stuff out loud, I wouldn't be surprised if this is one of the really dumb situations in which the person files the lawsuit and never serves it.
Well, that's what I thought. That's what I thought, Justin, because I'm a very amateur lawyer just from spending time with you and hearing you over the time. Right away when this was filed, as much as I wanted it to succeed, I knew the word rumor, like, there's no way. That's out. But a couple of questions on this. First of all, couldn't they just be doing this? And I guess this isn't a legal question; it's more of a business question. Couldn't they just be doing this to, like, calm their employees? Like, apparently their employees freaked out about this Twitter posting. Couldn't you just be like, all right, guys, settle down. We're not closing. We're going to sue this guy.
That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, right? Like, instead of spending $250,000 on a lawsuit.
Okay, hold on. That was my second question, though. So, don't they have, like, in-house attorneys? Like, does it not work that way?
Some do.
You're just our guy, so.
I mean, Morello probably has a personal attorney who maybe has licensure in Nevada, but I think I saw the caption to this lawsuit, and it was a law firm. I'm almost positive I saw it. I can't remember who it is off the top of my head, but I looked at the caption. It was posted when the story originally came out. So it was outside counsel. There's only most of the casinos do not litigate in-house. So they'll send those to other counsel. They're there for compliance issues, contract issues, HR issues. The only one that I'm aware of that litigates is MGM, has its own litigation counsel in-house. But that's if that's the reason, man, that's dumb. He may have deep pockets, but man, if they're not getting business right now, those pockets have got to be really freaking deep, right? I mean,
yeah.
And he just bought the Arizona Coyotes, and he's got, the bulk of his liquidity is tied up in two major casinos right now. I mean, I know he made his money doing pizza chains, but I don't think that that's the primary source of his income. He owns the Grand Sierra up in Reno, which he did a great job in and renovating and making it. I think it's great. That's where I stay whenever I can. It's right next to the airport. And then bought the Sahara. I liked what he was doing there too, but this just seems like a really unwise legal and business decision.
God,
like, if he's got deep pockets and he wants his employees to feel better, then give him a bonus.
You're right. Okay, I have problems with both Vital Vegas, the blogger, and Sahara, so I don't really know which side I'm picking. I asked this yesterday, but I'll do it for this audience too, and just try to explain it more. So this is a blogger, as we said, Vital Vegas, who likes to throw out, like, everything that he hears on his Twitter account, and that's I find a lot of value from that Twitter account. I enjoy it, but I also take it for what it is, about 50-50. Like, 50% of the time, I'm probably going to be right, 50% wrong. But it keeps you up to date on, like, the word around town, whatever. Like, I do think he actually is plugged in. He hears things. Same with LV Locally, the other one, who, God, I want to know who runs that account. But either way, like, those sites do that. They throw it out. The problem that I have with this blogger, Vital Vegas, is that he throws out all of his rumors, and then when they do turn out to be true, attacks the media like, see, I'm the best news source. I'm the media. I break all the stories. So he claims his rumors are reports. So you said yesterday that just because you claim your rumors are reports doesn't change the meaning of the word rumor. Like, we need to fix that. Once you make a claim on something, you should be held to that.
That's some inside baseball reporter bullshit that nobody else cares about. But let's just go down that road and say that he is now held to a journalistic standard. Well, defamation's even harder there, right? Now you have to show that he acted with actual malice he was trying to hurt the Sahara in his post, and he knew it to be false at the time. It's a higher standard for the media. So, yeah, I don't know that that's an argument the Sahara would want to win. And I definitely don't think the public gives a shit about, like, that kind of stuff. I follow both of those accounts too. And like, from my perspective, what I perceive his account to be is this is what the people in the industry are saying. Whether or not it's true or not, that's what they're saying. And I understand that, a blackjack dealer or a pit boss or, a hotel exec may not actually know the truth. It's just what they're saying is going on. And so, yeah, I take it for what it's worth.
I was going to say, we understand what's going on, though. The people at the paper get angry because these guys are taking shots on them all the time, and the paper has a much higher standard to uphold, and these guys are, blasting them all the time. So anytime they have an incorrect report at a certain level, it's time to put it in the paper.
I would say, like, does Vital Vegas understand all the stuff that we know that we don't put out there because we don't have the backing, we don't have all that, and it's insane, like, how he'll be like, oh, we're way ahead of it. Like, yeah, we hear a million things a day that we could put out there if we didn't have any standards or weren't held to any sort of level. It's ridiculous. But I don't know if people understand that.
Here's the interesting thing on the go ahead, Justin.
Well, that's the basis for saying that they're not media and they don't get the journalistic First Amendment protection, and that the defamation standard is lower. But then we fall back on the fact that he specifically said in this challenge post, it's a rumor. And it isn't what he has defined the rumor to be. It's what does the person receiving it believe it to be. Right. And when the person receiving it sees rumor, I think everybody understands that means this may not be true.
Stop getting mad. Just ignore him. If you follow his account, or at least if you the message board on these initial stories, people were blasting him, and like he, the shine that he gets from getting some stories right here or there, to me, is also nixed by the fact that he's a giant pussy. So he blocks everyone who disagrees with him, and he's an anti-masker. So he's been going on that and irking people, which is fine to put the information out if you want to. Stand, behind your stance, but then don't block people like a freaking pansy. And he does it all the time.
Yeah. Did you told me yesterday I think you said not to say why I was mad at Sahara, but to save it for this? You don't have to. I would say there's some deception with their resort fees that I don't like. It's not good.
You mean there's casinos that they're really good with the resort fees that are better?
At least honest.
Yeah.
I would say. Yeah.
All right, let's get back to the nitty gritty of what's going on around college sports, and we've all had a chance to think about this more and more and more. Again, I want to explain to the audience, and I want to hear the explanation again about liability and why the Big Ten and the Pac-12 looked at this, and maybe they're like, listen, with the players uniting, this new heart condition coming up, and at least 5 Big Ten athletes, like, we need time to fix this. If they're playing in the fall, how serious are the crosshairs of liability for these schools with their football players?
I don't think there's any crosshairs for liability. I think that this is a bullshit, false narrative out there for them to say the decision's taken out of our hands because we'll get sued by all these lawyers who, by the way, have not been fucking filing these lawsuits. There hasn't been a single lawsuit filed in the state of Nevada for contraction of COVID-19 for a business as a patron. It hasn't happened, right? As far as we could tell in all the research, there's been 200 total in the United States. And I don't even know if those are successful. I don't know the ins and outs of any of those. But that's not a real fucking concern, especially when we're talking about college sports in which they're already signing a waiver for known risks. So you're just going to put in the waiver extra language that pertains specifically to COVID-19 that says, hey, man, here are the things that we're going to try to do to protect you, but we can't guarantee your protection. And if you go do something stupid or one of your teammates goes and does something stupid, we can't guarantee that we can monitor everybody for 24 hours a day. So there is a risk of you contracting COVID-19 by moving forward, and there's nothing we can do to ensure that that doesn't happen 100%. We can't. Here's the only measures we are taking, and you're accepting that risk or not. And the argument I made on air the other day was, what's more likely to happen? A life-altering injury, physical injury, as a result of playing college football, or contracting COVID-19 and having your health altered for the rest of your life? I would say the former is much more likely than the latter. You don't ever see litigation because of that, because it's a known risk of the participation, and it's and you waive your rights by engaging in the activity. And I think the same thing's here. What I really think some of this is about is if they had pushed this, and we'll see with the SEC and if they actually do play. I'm still not convinced they are going to play, but let's say some of the other conferences do play. What you may see is this could have been the last straw towards unionization of the players, because if the schools are saying it is not safe to have students back here, and every Pac-12 school said that, right? They're all virtual. It is not safe to have students on campus, but we are in financial hardship and athletics bring in so much finances that we are going to go ahead and move forward with sports. How can you characterize them as anything other than employees at that point? And this whole student athlete bullshit connotation just goes out the window. And there were signs, at least in the Pac-12 and the Big Ten specifically, I think Pac-12 was the first, that the athletes were beginning to see this as a leverage point. We have them where we need them right now, which is they need our money. They need us to participate in these activities. We will, but we're going to get something for it. And I just don't think the Pac-12 or the Big Ten wanted to engage in that sort of negotiation.
So are the SEC, the Big 12, and the ACC just blind to this? It's wishful thinking. Like, it's going to happen. There are going to be players. We saw it already. ACC, Florida State's a legacy program, and the players there are like, what's happening here with the testing? The other one, I think this one's fascinating, and this one builds off of your point that you made, Justin, that another big factor is you've got conferences with schools in all these different states, in all different stages of COVID, with all different thoughts on masking and COVID hoaxers and all that. The ACC, to me, is one of the more intriguing because this thing stretches from freaking Massachusetts and New York all the way down to Florida, and Syracuse in New York, where they had, 35,000 deaths or whatever it is, right? That's the state that got freaking smashed. The Syracuse players, headline here in the Syracuse.com, Syracuse football players sit out practice again, want more frequent testing during the preseason. So what is I don't understand this confidence of the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 12. Like, our players won't be woke. They're not going to unite. Like, eventually they're going to bond together. They will. It's undeniable.
I certainly hope so. It'd be a sad commentary if the players associated with one or two of the Big Five conferences just sort of put their head down and became good troopers for the conference or for their schools. But I just can't. I'm with you. I don't see how the hell they think they're going to navigate all of these state and local laws that are going to be in place, and these governors and their executive orders and emergency declarations, and how they're going to navigate all of that to play a game. I mean, that's going to take some serious lobbying, and it's going to have to really work in a whole bunch of different ways. And there's no way they're there yet. There's no way they're there yet. Now, the New York part is an interesting sort of case to look at, because I don't know if you're aware of this. Governor Cuomo said, "Hey, public schools are going to be open back up. It's time to send the kids back to school. Our numbers are where they need to be. You know, we have, you know, we're down at the bottom of that curve now, and so the social benefit for sending kids to school outweigh the risk at this point for where we are as a state." And you know, they had the travel restrictions and all of that. So if they're sending kids back to public school, I think the state of New York would have a hell of a hard time saying colleges can't have their people back, or colleges can't allow sports to be played. That would be, so it's too dangerous for college kids, but it's okay for my 6-year-old. That doesn't sound good. And so I don't think New York's going to be the impediment to something that happens in the ACC. But I just, unless something changes drastically in our country in the, you know, next couple of weeks, as far as our reporting numbers, and all states just unite and say, okay, it's over, we're done, everybody can go back to their normal life, I just don't see how this season's going to start on time. And I think, you know, I think what the Pac-12 and Big Ten did makes sense. Is it's not that we're not going to play, it's that it's delayed until we have some information that tells us we can do it safely. That just makes a lot of sense to me. And spring football would be rad. Vaccines out, everybody's good, let's go to games.
Maybe the vaccine's out.
No, I know. I'm saying if I'm not saying it's gonna happen. I'm saying that's certainly on the table. It's certainly a possibility.
Here's the question I had about when we going back to liability, and we talk about risks and, you know, the known risks of potential injury and that sort of thing. What is the difference between COVID and CTE and the head injuries that did become an issue when, like, hey, you knew you knew there was risks. Like, everybody knew there was risk. We didn't know exactly what the risks were. Like, you knew there was risk of getting hurt. You didn't know that it could jostle your brain and break your brain apart, but you knew there was risk. In this case, you know there's risk of getting sick, and we don't know what it could do long term. And now we know it could mess up your heart and your other organs and everything else. But I guess why is that different?
Oh, that's an excellent question. So, a waiver is a contract. It's a contract between somebody who's going to do something and somebody who's going to allow you to do something. And it requires a meeting of the minds. What that means is that you both have an understanding of what the agreement says and where those, if it's an assumption of risk, it's a waiver, what those risks are and what's being waived. You can only waive a known risk. In the situation of the CTE, the arguments that made the cases interesting and ultimately successful is you knew of a fact that would have been important for us in making a decision on waiver, and you held back that fact. You had information available to you that wasn't available to us, that you know would have been important to us in making that decision and making a known waiver. So we made, what you attempted to do is keep us in the dark and make an unknown waiver. So we never waived that risk because we never knew it. If you didn't know it, okay, that's fine, but you did know it. And so you can't hold back facts that you know would be material to the other side's decision-making process and still have an enforceable contract based on those facts you knew and they didn't know. So that's the difference. Here, both sides can say, we don't know a whole hell of a lot, and I'm waiving my risks, or I'm waiving my rights as to that unknown. I bear the burden of the unknown. What wouldn't work is if the schools did know what the long-term risks were and they didn't disclose it to the other side and got the waiver.
Let me play some audio, because we had a guy named Aaron Torres from Fox Sports on, who's been on fire on Twitter, calling the Big Ten gutless. What a dumb decision. They're not going to be able to do this in the fall. And one of his big points was, again, liability. Like, the liability is not going to change in the spring, they're still going to have issues with it. So let's give a listen to his explanation, and we'll get your answer. He needs an attorney around to bounce things off of. That's what I think.
If the issue is liability, which you just discussed, you're banking on in 3.5 months having a vaccine that clears all medical, federal testing, all the things that it takes to get a vaccine to the market. You're relying on that vaccine to work. You're relying on that vaccine to be mass produced. And by the way, there's still liability if you require a player to take a vaccine, because we won't know what the long-term ramifications are. And that's under the assumption that we get a vaccine.
Justin?
So, I mean, I guess I disagree with the premise of the question, right? He was asked a question about they're doing this because of liability concerns, and I just don't buy that. I don't think that's the reason. But let's go down that road. Let's assume they are making the decision based on liability. I don't think he's wrong in his analysis that the liability question is always going to be out there, but the solution, and I agree with his point, is the solution is the same in both situations, right? It's a waiver. So you're going to waive today, or you're going to waive in, I don't know, about 3.5 months. I would be thinking more 6 months, right? Do spring football, but okay. I think from my perspective, I think there's legitimately concern over player and student health. I do think that that's legitimate and earnest. It certainly seems that way from the comments from the presidents of both Big Ten and Pac-12 schools. I think it's financial, that having games in places where you're not allowed to have fans, and I don't think there's a single Pac-12 state that would allow fans right now. Maybe Utah. I don't know how they're treating all this.
Arizona will. Arizona
Yeah,
probably let 100% capacity in.
Yeah, they're crazy. All right. So, okay. So 2 states, but in essence, the financials of that aren't going to make sense. But in 6 months, they might, right? You might be in a place where you can actually have people at the games and paying ticket prices. And so I think, just from a purely financial standpoint, I would delay it to the spring just to see, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars that you're just throwing away by cramming it down right now in the fall.
Adam, anything else on the college front?
No, I mean, I think that was the best point of, like, what if you don't think you're going to be able to get through a season, then push it off, go to spring, and then maybe at that point you say, hey, we still can't do it. But there's a chance. Like, it's better than trying to do it now and just shutting it down.
Let's address the vaccine point, because that's going to be a big one, and not on the waiver stuff. We have a vaccine widely available, next February and March. Will we get rid of mask mandates? But you can't require people to take the vaccine. But could businesses have, again, you're going to have Karens all over the place and anti-vaxxers, but could businesses actually require people to have paperwork on them, like, did you take the vaccine or not? And if you didn't, then you got to wear a mask. And it's like the next layer of having to deal with bullshit. But are we going to have like crazy anti-vaxxers actually reduce all the joy that we're going to get, most of us, when there's a vaccine out and they're like, I won't take it. And then you're like, well, we still have the same problem. Now I'm around morons who won't wear masks and won't take the vaccine. Like, what the hell?
Steve, didn't you take the vaccine?
What do you mean?
You can't get it from them if you took it.
Right.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's the point, right? That's what's different about the mask versus the vaccine, right? The mask, I wear my mask to protect you. It does not protect me unless I got one of the, N95s. If I take the vaccine, I'm protected. If you're an idiot, you're an idiot, like whatever. But that depends on how the vaccine works, right? There's a reason why schools require vaccination records before your kids can go in there. And it's because the vaccines aren't always perfect. It depends on how they're used and when they get, their boosters and all that shit. So if anti-vaxxer kids get to come into the school, they can somehow bring, like, I don't know, fucking polio or some shit back. I can't remember which one it is, but Like then all of a sudden there's a polio outbreak because our vaccines are dated, or it could be mutated. The polio thing can mutate. It's not completely out of the question what you're talking about. We have a history of that, right? To say that there are certain situations in which we will require vaccinations before we let you fully participate into society. Do I think they're going to be standing at the door of the Wynn and say, show me your vaccination papers before I let you in? No, I don't, right? Like, everybody's welcome.
All right. Let's close on a couple of important stories. Local angle developing. Headline on this one is Judge poses authority issue in lawsuit on closed Vegas bars. So what exactly is happening here? A judge poses authority issue in lawsuit on closed Vegas bars.
The fact that the judge asked this question in the hearing leads me to believe that the bars are not going to win, even though I think they should. It's not uncommon for a judge to say, what's my authority to act? It sounds crazy, but the judges don't want to actually act when they don't have the authority to act. They don't want to be overturned, and they don't want to create confusion of the law. So it may be that there has been briefing done, there already has been some briefing done, and the hearing comes up and neither of the parties adequately addressed the authority that the court has. So not only do I have authority to hear this case, of course I got authority to hear this case, but give me the bandwidth of my authority. What are the options on the table for me, and walk me through that legally. Show me some precedent in which that's done before so I can have some comfort in doing it. But here, the governor's counsel is taking the position that, hey, it's declaration of emergency. He's got discretion to do what he sees fit. And there is no law that you're going to find in Nevada that shows that the court can overturn that. I think that's bullshit, right? I mean, I think you don't need legal authority. You've got the Constitution. Again, this is checks and balances, right? None of the executive branch's authority is unchecked by courts. You're always going to bump it up against the Constitution. So the answer is, what's my authority to act? The Constitution of the state of Nevada and the Constitution of the United States, which says that you cannot deprive anybody of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. You cannot take away somebody's ability to earn money just because you want to. You have to have a rational basis for doing so, which is a low standard. If they're trying to affect one of the enumerated rights, First Amendment rights, freedom of religion, then you're going to have to show that it is narrowly tailored, that the law is narrowly tailored. Here, you only have to show that the law that you're trying to impose has a rational basis to a legitimate government interest. And I think the argument for the bars here is there is no rational basis, because you're allowing these casinos to do everything else. So if it was rational to close us down, then it was rational to close down the casinos, and you didn't do that. So therefore, you're acting irrationally, which is the argument that makes sense to me. Like I don't know how you can put it any other way other than freaking it's politics, and it's lobbying that gets the casinos open and the bars closed.
So what's the next step? What's the next step for bars in trying to get open up?
Well, you're going to see, I imagine you'll see a ruling come down from this court within probably a week or two. And then you'll see an appeal. If either way, you'll see an appeal. It'll work its way up to the Nevada Supreme Court. And I would guess within 30 days or so, you'll see an opinion come down. And frankly, again, I hope everybody doesn't just, now we're on our third branch of government. I hope the judicial branch does not just cower to the whims and the powers of the executive branch under any circumstances. I'm not saying this because Governor Sisolak, I got nothing against Governor Sisolak. He's doing what he thinks is best. Okay. But especially in times of emergency, you have to check the powers. And when you don't check the powers, you create bad precedent in the law for future situations. So I hope the bars win.
How common is a question like that from a judge?
I think you hear it. You hear it a lot. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I can't say like a percentage wise. I would just say it's not uncommon, especially when you're talking about constitutional issues at the first level, the district court's first level, right? Then we have the Supreme Court above that, and if the Supreme Court doesn't want to hear that, they can push the case down to our intermediate appellate court to decide, and then can come back up if they don't like that. So, frankly, a Clark County District Court does not hear constitutional issues every day. So when you have a case like this, they're going to try to cross their T's and dot their I's. They're going to make sure that they are standing on firm legal ground when they make a ruling. And I think it's a good question, right? What are my options? What can I do? Talk to me about my authority in the law in this situation. Where does it start? Where does it end? And tell me everything in between, so that I can have an understanding of what it is I can do.
It sounded like you said at the beginning that's probably a bad sign for the bars. Like, would I be reading it wrong to say, okay, it seems like the judge wants to do something, but they're like, can I do something here? Like, can you give me a reason why I can do this?
That's the other way to read too. I know this judge a little bit, and I'm just going to say I don't think they're going to that question from this judge in the manner in which I read the quote. My immediate thought is the bar's lost. But you're not wrong, right? You could read that as there's a lot of times in which that question will be asked to say, like, hey, I want to help you here, but you've got to tell me how it is I can do it and how I can do it legally so that it stands up to an appeal. Because we all know whatever side she comes out on, this judge, there's going to be an appeal.
Last one and most important story of the night, where I actually think the verbiage is funny, but I understand why people are mad. I'll see if I can punch it up. Lawsuit.
By the way, the bars have a really good attorney on this, so that's good.
Lawsuit accuses former SoulCycle CEO of making crass comment about paternity leave. Lawsuit filed by former employee alleges pregnancy discrimination. Adam, exactly. Well, what's one of the lines that stood out to you?
The CEO of SoulCycle, who's a female, said of a male executive.
Ooh! Now, say it again. Wait, that's not what I expected. I was expecting male on male crime. Female on male. Ooh, okay.
Female CEO tells a male who was going to take paternity leave that, quote, paternity leave is for pussies.
I might be with her. No.
It was it's fantastic. I think reading this a little bit it seems like the suit is actually filed by a female employee, but that this was just part of the suit that was prepared. That this is the CEO's attitude toward maternity and paternity leave. The guy took paternity leave because he could. He was entitled to it, and his wife had only a certain amount. She had to go back to work. He was going to spend time with the baby, and they were told, hey, it's really good to bond with the baby. Childcare costs are out of control. He's like, all right, I'm going to take my paternity leave. And she's like, paternity leave is for pussies. The lawsuit is actually filed by a female employee who was let go during her maternity leave and during the pandemic, by the way, which is obnoxious.
Gangster.
Yeah, you're right. It was not the claimant who was the man who was called a pussy. Or that his act was the act of pussies. It was a woman who was citing that to get into intent, right? I was let go. The pandemic was used as a pretext. What this was really about was I was let go because I was out on maternity leave. And the reason why we know this is because the CEO hates that. She has made that clear through comments before. And so it's more as evidence of the intent and the fact that the paternity was merely used as pretext for termination.
Is it relevant?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Because you can say, hey, I got fired. And they say, okay, what's the reason? The reason why is we laid off a whole bunch of people during the pandemic. And their response is, no, that's not the real reason. That's just pretext. Now the burden's on that person to show what the real reason is and what's going to be relevant to show what the actual intent is. You have any evidence that puts you into the mind of the company when they made the act. So yeah, it's absolutely relevant.
Justin's
But
number
I
is
just
5.
imagine this like CEO being like a former Soul Cycle like instructor, just like this, crazy super fitness lady who's just going around calling everybody pussies all the time.
Wow. This paternity leave thing was a big deal in sports radio about 2 years ago because there was a big fight on one of the stations in Boston where one of the behind the scenes dudes was taking paternity leave, and one of the hosts on the air basically was like, "You're a pussy. I work harder than you, and you shouldn't be taking off, and you're just not as good as me." And of course, Adam and I, because we're crass, we sided with the host who was insulting the guy. But there are tons of people who were like, "This host is an asshole." I'm just like, I come from the standpoint that I work. I don't have kids. That's what I do. But I understand why, dads are necessary. So we should all be on the same team and stand up for dads.
Wasn't Peloton in some hot water recently too? Like all of these companies seem to just have like lunatics running them.
Well, they ride on fucking bikes and go nowhere for a fucking hour and a half at a time, right? I mean, I have a Peloton bike. I like it. I mean, I use it, especially during this pandemic. It's been great. But I mean, hey, it ain't like these people are on, the fittest of minds, right? They're like addicted to an indoor bike.
How often do you use it?
At least 3 times a week.
Okay. How much is it? We're doing an ad for
bike.
It
I'm going to use rough numbers. I don't remember exactly. I'm going to say $2,000 for the bike.
Ooh.
And then you can pay a monthly app subscription so that you constantly have live classes to choose from. And it's not just biking for Peloton anyway. I can speak only on Peloton. So it's $40 a month for the app, but that app works on like Apple TV and Amazon TV, and it has yoga, meditation, stretching, CrossFit, I don't know, some other bullshit that you can do, and then you could ride the bike with it on the screen on the bike too. I'm a fan. I think it's great, especially during these times. It's replaced the gym for me for the time being.
I just got annoyed because I was having a conversation about it with some people, and they were like going over their favorite instructors and like, I like this person. I like this person. I'm like, I can't be a part of this culture. I can't do it.
I'm in it, and I have a hard time with that conversation too. I'm like, oh God, what the fuck, man? Like, just ride your fucking bike. Right?
Ride your bike. Just ride your bike.
But it is kind of cool. I will say this. I don't do this, but it allows you to like create your social network on your bike, right? So you can connect to your friends. So you can ride at the same time in the same class and see like the stats. So if that's your motivating thing, that's not how I work. Like when I run or when I bike, I don't want to do it with anybody else. I just want to do it myself and do my thing. But I know a lot of people that are into that, and that's what keeps them motivated, and that's all cool. To go back to the original point though, I will say I'm a big fan of paternity leave. We made it a big issue in our policy procedures at the firm. Maternity, we pay it for 8 weeks, and it's adoptions, it's surrogates, it's live childbirth, all that stuff. But just to have your guys' back too, I had my first kid when I had started the firm 3 months prior to having my first kid. So my wife was 6 months pregnant when we started the firm. And bro, I was in the room with my laptop doing work because it was the early days, man, and like I couldn't turn down work. Like I was the receptionist, I was the paralegal, I was everything, and I couldn't have the doors closed for even a freaking day. Those first 3 months, you don't know if you're gonna make it or not. That first year, you gotta hustle.
So you went from that to running a hippie organization now where everybody's taking off for everything.
We got a guy out right now, actually, on paternity leave. He just had a kid like 2 weeks ago.
He didn't have a kid.
I know, but like, hey, man, do you want your kids to love you or not, man? You got to be there. And to be fair, like my wife had a C-section, and so like it ain't like she just popped up and walked out of the hospital. Like I was taking care of that kid for the first like couple weeks, and then my mom came in, so we had some extra hands around. But some of those, it's not always perfect for the mom to just come home and start running around with a kid all day long. It's not that easy.
I was not suggesting it was easy. I was just saying the phrasing of "I had a kid" has always bothered me. Like, no, you didn't. You were there.
Calm down. It's a major life-altering event, bro. You can call it whatever you want. It changes everything.
Oh, I'm all in right now because I'm in a very heated baby pool with a friend of mine. So I'm very into a birth that's coming up at any day.
Celebrity birth or people you're friends with?
No. Two of my very good friends. I have the over August 17th at noon.
Okay.
So I'm waiting it out. Waiting it out here.
The person who is pregnant is aware of the bet in the pool and has.
Oh yeah, she knows.
Oh, that was it. You pushed it too long. Wait, is he back in? Is he out? Okay, now he's back in.
Yeah, the person who the pregnant woman. Yes, she actually created the lines. I believe there's a time of day, date, height, and weight.
Okay, is there bonuses if you hit it exactly?
It's a parlay. No, it was basically a parlay.
All right.
Trying to go 4 for 4, but I figured if the baby takes a while to come out, it's going to be bigger, right? You would think it'd be growing more in there. So I went with later because I wanted her to suffer and have the baby longer in her. And I was like, well, if it's later, then it's going to be larger. So I'm going to go over on the height and weight and time of day and everything else.
Well thought out.
Yeah. AM PM is kind of a crapshoot, though.
You're a putz. 570-9000 is the number. Give Justin business. Call him up. Get legal advice from him if that's what you need. And we have to say we're very casual when we talk about Justin because we've done this for so long. We're not cramming it down your throats. But like tonight's a good example. When I hear other attorneys who are working with people and they're like, that attorney's my friend, or you can really trust him. This guy is on vacation doing this stupid podcast. I like the podcast, and I'm glad you guys are here. But like, it's a microcosm of who he is. The fact that he's committed to it and he's doing it on vacation, that should tell everyone, like, you want to freaking, you need help legally. Like, he's going to do a good job for you if he's going to do this podcast at freaking midnight when he's in, beautiful California right now. So that was all a stumbling effort to say thank you, Justin.
Oh man, thanks. I love doing this stuff. It's good. Thanks for the kind words. And I'll just say, I love the people who listen to this podcast and comment on it and hit me up afterwards, or hit up the people that I know and talk about the radio spot too. It's really cool. It's hard to believe we've been doing it for 8 years now, almost 9. Yeah, I will work on your case in the hospital delivery room. Hopefully I'm not having any more kids. I think I'm done there, but I would do it. So yeah, I just enjoy doing this stuff with you guys anyway. But I wouldn't miss the late night legal podcast. Like, that's not going to be missed.
All right, everybody. We'll see you soon. And if you listen to the radio show, we may have a big announcement tomorrow. We'll probably like we do everything. And my guess is that it'll probably be announced at like 5:58
Hold on.
on Cofield and Company.
5:58 tomorrow. Or I'm actually going to say it right now. Tomorrow on the show, we are going to tell you